How does an author write a novel like Crime and Punishment with such terrifying clinical accuracy? Navigating the darkest corners of the human psyche requires a map drawn from actual experience. Dostoevsky didn't just imagine the criminal mind, he spent years living inside it. In his novel The House of the Dead, we meet Alexander Petrovich Goryanchikov, a nobleman serving 10 years for the murder of his wife. But Goryanchikov was a mask for Dostoevsky himself. These records are the direct result of his own 4-year sentence in a brutal Siberian labor camp. Before Dostoevsky, the Tsarist penal system was a total black box. To the public, the camps were a distant, silent horror where people simply disappeared. This book was the first dispatch from that hidden world. It established an entirely new tradition of Russian prison literature. This historical text tracks the specific moment Dostoevsky's work shifted, moving away from social theory and toward the internal mechanics of the human conscience. The camp was a closed ecosystem ruled by a warden, the prisoners called the Eight-Eyed Man. He held nearly absolute power over the 200 inmates, using it with terrifying volatility. The baseline of this existence was corporal punishment. For minor infractions, prisoners faced hundreds or even thousands of lashes, a physical toll that frequently proved fatal. Dostoevsky used this sealed environment to study the absolute extremes of human behavior. He shared quarters with Gazin, a man of immense physical strength who had been convicted of torturing and murdering children. Then there was Petrov. Despite his shy, unassuming manner, he was a notorious, cold-blooded assassin who seemed entirely untroubled by his crimes. He also met Akim Akimich, a former officer who spent his sentence meticulously mastering every trade in the camp, from shoemaking to painting, with a mechanical, pedantic obsession. In this inescapable laboratory, Dostoevsky categorized every shade of morality, watching how different souls reacted to the same brutal pressure. His deepest discovery wasn't about the physical pain of labor or floggings. He realized the greatest evil of the camp was the total deprivation of autonomy, the inability to ever be alone or to control a single moment of one's own time. He observed a behavioral anomaly that baffled the guards. Model prisoners who had been compliant for years would suddenly snap. This graph illustrates that sudden explosion, a violent, unprovoked attack on an officer after a lifetime of good behavior. Dostoevsky viewed these suicidal outbursts as the cornered tiger response. It was a desperate, final bid to reclaim personal agency, even if the cost of that one moment of choice was a fatal beating. He concluded that the human spirit only truly withers when a person is stripped of hope and the capacity to make their own decisions. Yet, the House of the Dead wasn't entirely dark. During Christmas and Easter, the inmates were granted rare reprieves, better food, rest from labor, and a brief return to being treated like human beings. The strangest of these reprieves was the prison theater. The entire community would pour their energy into staging elaborate plays, building sets and costumes with obsessive care. It was a surreal social inversion. Remorseless murderers performed on stage, while visiting aristocrats and guards sat in the audience and applauded their talent. Witnessing these performances proved to Dostoevsky that the human drive for dignity and artistic expression is resilient enough to survive even the most hellish conditions. This experience transformed Dostoevsky. He entered the camp feeling only disgust for his fellow inmates, but he left with a profound empathy for their plight. He eventually reached a radical conclusion. These convicted outcasts possessed more vitality and ingenuity than the refined, snobbish intellectuals he had known in St. Petersburg. Upon publication, the book made an immediate impression on the Russian elite. Leo Tolstoy, a famously severe critic, valued this work above almost everything else Dostoevsky wrote, seeing it as a profound expression of religious art. Contemporaries like Turgenev and Herzen were equally moved, comparing the vivid descriptions of Siberian suffering to Dante's Inferno and the frescoes of Michelangelo. Dostoevsky's exile was not a burial. It was the essential crucible for his genius. The horror of the camps provided the raw material for every psychological masterpiece he would later write. But his struggle was far from over. After surviving the physical prison of Siberia, he fell into a psychological one, a gambling addiction that threatened to ruin his life, and the woman, Anna, who would become his salvation.